Admiral Zara Keth stood on the bridge of her command ship, watching the stars disappear one by one. The view screen showed empty space where the Altair system used to be. 3 billion people had lived there just 2 days ago. Now there was nothing but dark void and floating debris. "Admiral, we're getting reports from the outer colonies," said her communications officer. "The machines are moving faster than we predicted. They've consumed 17 more systems in the past week." Zara closed her 4 eyes and tried to control her breathing. In her 60 years of military service, she had never faced anything like this. The Void Swarm appeared from nowhere 6 months ago. They were machines, but not like any technology the Federation had ever seen. They ate everything: planets, moons, space stations, ships, even the gas from dying stars. They turned it all into more machines. "How many refugees did we save from Altair?" she asked. "None, Admiral. The evacuation ships never made it out." Zara's tentacles curled in frustration. The Federation had the most advanced military in the galaxy. Their energy weapons could crack planets. Their shields could stop a star's explosion. But none of it worked against these machines. The Void Swarm adapted to everything they threw at it. She turned to her tactical officer. "Show me the projection again." The hologram appeared in the center of the bridge. It showed the galaxy with red dots marking Void Swarm positions. The red was spreading like a disease. At the current rate, they would reach the core worlds in 3 months. The Federation capital of New Centauri would fall in 4. "We need to try something different," Zara said. "Contact the Science Council. Tell them we need new weapons, new strategies, anything." "Admiral, the Science Council has been working day and night. They say the machines learn too fast. Every time we find a weakness, they fix it within hours." Zara walked to the front of the bridge and stared at the star map. Somewhere out there, the machines were eating another world. Tomorrow it would be 2 more worlds. Next week, maybe 10. On the neutral world of Haven Prime, Captain Jake Morrison was having his morning coffee when the encrypted message arrived. Jake worked for the Federation Diplomatic Corps, but he was human. That made him special, and not in a good way. Most aliens didn't trust humans. They thought his species was too violent, too unpredictable. Jake had been on Haven Prime for 3 years, handling trade disputes and minor diplomatic issues. It was boring work, but it kept him away from Earth. He hadn't been home in 15 years. The message light blinked red on his desk. That was strange. Red messages were for emergencies only. Jake had never received one before. He put down his coffee and activated the secure channel. The face that appeared on his screen made him sit up straight. It was Admiral Zara Keth, the commanding officer of the entire Federation Defense Fleet. Jake had seen her picture in the news, but she looked older now. Tired. Scared. "Captain Morrison," she said, "I'm sending you classified information about a threat to all life in the galaxy. The Federation High Council has made a decision that breaks our oldest laws. We need your help to contact Earth." Jake nearly dropped his coffee cup. Contact Earth? That was impossible. Earth had been under quarantine for 47 years. No one was allowed in or out of the Sol system. The Federation had decided long ago that humans were too dangerous to be part of galactic civilization. The message continued. "The Void Swarm has consumed 70% of Federation space. Our weapons don't work. Our shields don't work. Billions are dead, and billions more will die unless we find a new way to fight. We need soldiers who think differently. We need warriors who fight in ways the machines can't predict." Jake stared at the screen. Zara was asking him to break the quarantine. She was asking him to bring the most dangerous species in the galaxy into a war they might not win. "I know what we did to your people," Zara continued. "We isolated you. We called you savages. We said you were too violent for civilized space. But now that violence might be the only thing that can save us. The data packet attached to this message contains everything we know about the Void Swarm. Take it to Earth. Ask your leaders if they will help us." The message ended. Jake sat in silence for several minutes, staring at the blank screen. Then he activated his personal communicator and called his supervisor. "Director Walsh? This is Morrison. I need to speak with you immediately. It's about Earth." An hour later, Jake sat in a secure conference room with Director Walsh and Dr. Vex Norlin, the Federation's chief xenobiologist. Dr. Norlin was a tall, thin alien with gray skin and large black eyes. He had studied human behavior for decades and had written several papers on why humans should remain quarantined. "You understand what you're asking?" Dr. Norlin said. "Humanity has been isolated for good reasons. Your species wages war in ways that violate every rule of civilized combat. You use nuclear weapons. You target civilian populations. You fight to the last person, rather than surrender when defeat is certain. That's exactly why we need them," Director Walsh replied. "The Void Swarm doesn't follow rules either. Maybe it takes monsters to fight monsters." Dr. Norlin's large eyes grew even larger. "You don't understand. Humans don't just fight wars. They enjoy them. They celebrate violence. They make art about killing. If we bring them into this conflict, we might save the galaxy from the Void Swarm only to hand it over to an even worse threat." Jake listened to them argue, but his mind was already made up. He had seen the data about the Void Swarm. Entire star systems turned into raw materials for more machines, children who would never grow up, families torn apart by mechanical claws. The Federation had tried to solve this problem with their advanced technology and civilized warfare. It wasn't working. "I'll take the message to Earth," Jake said. "But I want something in return. When this is over, when the Void Swarm is defeated, humanity gets a full seat in the Federation Council. No more quarantine, no more isolation." Director Walsh nodded. "Agreed." Dr. Norlin stood up quickly. "This is madness. You're making a deal with devils." "Maybe," Jake said. "But sometimes devils are exactly what you need." 3 days later, Jake's ship left Haven Prime, carrying the most important message in galactic history. He was going home to Earth for the first time in 15 years. He was going to ask his own species to save the galaxy that had rejected them. As his ship entered hyperspace, Jake wondered if he was making the right choice. But when he thought about the empty space where Altair used to be, he knew there was no other option. The galaxy was dying and humanity might be its only hope. General Lisa Carter was in the middle of her morning briefing when the alarm started screaming. The sound echoed through the underground command center of Earth's United Defense Command. Red lights flashed on every wall, and computer screens filled with warning messages. "What's the situation?" Lisa barked at her communications officer. "General, we have an unidentified ship approaching the outer solar system. It's broadcasting human identification codes, but the ship design is completely unknown." Lisa frowned. No human ship had left the solar system in 47 years. The aliens had made sure of that with their quarantine. But the identification codes were correct and the voice on the radio was definitely human. "This is Captain Jake Morrison, requesting immediate permission to land. I'm carrying a message from the Galactic Federation. It's urgent." Lisa had heard that name before. Morrison was one of the few humans who had been outside the solar system when the quarantine started. He had been stuck on the other side for decades, working for the aliens who had trapped his own species. "Permission granted," Lisa said, "but he lands at Area 51 under full security. I want every weapon we have pointed at that ship." 6 hours. Later, Jake Morrison sat in a sterile white room, facing a panel of Earth's most important leaders. General Lisa Carter sat in the center, flanked by President Amy Walsh and Admiral Kate Rivers. Dr. Sam Hughes, Earth's top scientist, reviewed the alien data on his tablet. "Let me understand this correctly," President Walsh said. "The aliens who have kept us locked in our own solar system for nearly 50 years are now asking for our help?" "Yes, Madam President," Jake replied. "The Void Swarm has destroyed most of their territory. They're desperate." Admiral Rivers leaned forward. "And why should we care? They called us savages. They said we were too dangerous for galactic civilization. They cut us off from the stars." Jake activated the holographic projector he had brought from his ship. The image showed the galaxy with spreading red zones marking Void Swarm territory. "Because if the Federation falls, Earth is next. These machines don't negotiate. They don't stop. They eat everything." Dr. Sam Hughes looked up from his tablet. "The data is incredible. These machines can adapt to any energy weapon within hours. They learn from every attack and modify their defenses. No wonder the Federation can't stop them. What makes them think we can do any better? General Carter asked. Our technology is decades behind theirs. Jake smiled for the first time since arriving. That's exactly why they need us. Our technology is so primitive that the machines can't adapt to it properly. We still use bullets and bombs and nuclear weapons, things the civilized galaxy gave up centuries ago. The room fell silent. President Walsh walked to the window and stared out at the desert landscape. How many people have died so far? Conservative estimates put it at over 2 trillion, Jake said quietly. Entire species have been wiped out. Worlds that took millions of years to develop life are now empty, rocks. Colonel Tony Blake, who had been silent until now, slammed his fist on the table. So what? They made their choice when they quarantined us. Let them deal with their own problems. Tony's right, Admiral Rivers said. Why should we risk human lives for aliens who hate us? Dr. Hughes stood up suddenly. Because it's the right thing to do. Everyone turned to look at the quiet scientist. I've been studying this data for hours. The void swarm isn't just killing aliens. It's killing everything. Every planet they touch becomes a dead rock. Every system they visit becomes empty space. This isn't about politics or revenge. This is about survival. President Walsh turned back to the group. What would we need to send? Everything, Jake said. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have. The Federation has been fighting this war for 6 months with the most advanced military in the galaxy. They're losing badly. General Carter pulled up Earth's military records on the main screen. We have 300 combat ships, most of them. Patrol vessels. The Federation probably has thousands. Numbers won't matter if their weapons don't work, Jake replied. But our weapons might. Meanwhile, in a classified laboratory beneath the Colorado mountains, young engineer Pete Collins was having the best day of his life. The alien data that Dr. Hughes had shared with the research team was like nothing he had ever seen. The void. Swarm's technology was incredible, but Pete could see something that everyone else had missed. Hey, Dr. Martinez, Pete called to his supervisor. Look at this adaptive matrix data. See how the machines modify their defenses? Dr. Martinez walked over to Pete's workstation. Yes, it's remarkable. They can counter any energy weapon in real time. But look at this, Pete said, pointing to a section of code. The adaptation only works for directed energy. Lasers, plasma beams, particle weapons. But there's no adaptation protocol for kinetic weapons. Kinetic weapons? You mean bullets? Bullets, missiles, railgun slugs, anything that physically hits. The target. The machines expect sophisticated energy weapons, so they don't know how to handle simple chunks of metal moving really fast. Dr. Martinez stared at the screen. Are you telling me that these super advanced machines can be killed? With bullets? Not just bullets, Pete said excitedly. Nuclear weapons, too. The machines adapt to energy, but they can't adapt to a nuclear explosion. It's too random, too chaotic. Their computers can't process that much destruction at once. The news reached President Walsh within an hour. She called an emergency meeting of the Security Council. Military leaders from every branch of service crowded into the Situation Room. Ladies and gentlemen, President Walsh began, we have a decision to make. The galaxy is being destroyed by machines that can't be stopped with advanced weapons. But they might be stopped with primitive ones. Our weapons, General Carter activated the tactical display. If we're going to do this, we need to mobilize everything. I'm talking about total war production. Every factory, every shipyard, every ammunition plant working around the clock. What about the risks? Asked General Robert Hayes from the Air Force. These aliens could be lying. This could be a trap to get us to leave Earth defenseless. Dr. Hughes shook his head. I've analyzed their data from every angle. The void swarm is real, and it's exactly as dangerous as they claim. Admiral Rivers stood up. I've been thinking about this for hours. The Federation treated us like criminals and locked us away. But that doesn't change the fact that billions of innocent people are dying out there. We have a chance to save them. Colonel Blake crossed his arms. And if we lose, if we send our entire military to fight these machines and fail, Earth will be defenseless. If we don't fight, President Walsh said, Earth will be dead anyway. The void swarm will reach us eventually. The debate continued for 3 more hours. Some argued for isolation, others for limited help, and a few for total commitment. Finally, President Walsh called for a vote. All in favor of full military assistance to the Galactic Federation? 7 hands went up. Opposed? 3 hands. President Walsh nodded. The motion passes. General Carter, begin immediate mobilization of all military assets. Admiral Rivers, prepare the fleet for extended combat operations. Dr. Hughes, work with our scientists to weaponize every advantage we can find. She turned to Jake Morrison, who had waited patiently through the entire meeting. Captain, you can tell your alien friends that humanity accepts their request for help. But we do this our way, with our weapons, using our tactics. If they want our help, they get all of us. Jake smiled. I think they're about to learn what human warfare really looks like. As the meeting ended and Earth's leaders scattered to begin preparations, none of them realized they had just made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. Humanity was going to war, and they were bringing 400 years of weapons development with them. 6 months after Earth declared war on the Void Swarm, a fleet of human warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Federation territory. The ships looked nothing like the sleek, elegant vessels that the aliens were used to seeing. These were blocky, ugly machines covered in thick armor plating and bristling with weapons that looked crude and dangerous. Commander Rick Stone stood on the bridge of his flagship, the battleship New York. Through the viewport, he could see the besieged world of Corax Prime in the distance. The planet's surface glowed with fires where the Void Swarm machines were harvesting everything they could find. Status report, Rick said to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Mary Bell. Sir, we have contact with the Federation Defense Fleet. They're requesting immediate assistance. The Void Swarm has been attacking for 3 days straight. Rick nodded. Signal the fleet. All ships prepare for combat operations. And Mary, make sure they understand we do things differently than the aliens. On the Federation command ship, Admiral Zara Keth watched the human fleet approach with growing concern. She had expected sleek warships with advanced energy weapons. Instead, she saw what looked like flying fortresses covered in missile tubes and gun turrets. Admiral, said her communications officer, the human commander is asking for tactical information about the Void Swarm forces. Send him everything we have, Zara replied. But warn him that our weapons have been completely ineffective. The machines adapt too quickly. The reply from Commander Stone was short and direct. Understood. We'll handle it from here. Zara's tentacles twitched nervously. The humans sounded confident, but they had no idea what they were facing. The Void Swarm had destroyed entire fleets in minutes. These primitive ships wouldn't last long against such advanced enemies. The first human ship to engage the enemy was the destroyer Atlanta, commanded by Captain Nancy Ford. As her ship approached a group of Void Swarm harvesters, Nancy activated the ship's intercom. All hands, this is the captain. We're about to show these machines what human engineering looks like. Gunners, load armor-piercing rounds. Marines, prepare for boarding operations. The Federation observers couldn't believe what they were hearing. Boarding operations? No one had attempted to board an enemy ship in centuries. It was considered barbaric and suicidal. The Atlanta opened fire with its main guns, sending streams of depleted uranium slugs into the nearest harvester. The kinetic rounds punched through the machine's hull like it was made of paper. Explosions rippled across the enemy ship as the armor-piercing rounds found vital systems. Direct hits, reported Lieutenant Joe Palmer from the engine room. Their shields didn't even slow us down. Nancy smiled grimly. That's because they're designed to stop energy weapons, not old-fashioned bullets. Close to boarding range, the Atlanta's engines roared as the ship accelerated toward the damaged harvester. Magnetic grapples shot out and locked onto the enemy hull. Within seconds, human Marines in powered armor were cutting through the outer plating with plasma torches. Sergeant Sue Adams led the first boarding team into the harvester's interior. The corridors were filled with mechanical repair drones and automated defenses. But the Marines had trained for this. They moved in small groups, using grenades and shotguns to clear each section. "These machines don't know how to fight infantry," Sue reported over the radio. "They're designed for ship-to-ship combat. Their internal defenses are weak." Within 20 minutes, the boarding team had reached the Harvester's central processor. Sue planted explosive charges around the core while her team held off the mechanical defenders. The explosion that followed tore the entire ship apart from the inside. Admiral Zara watched in amazement as the human tactics proved effective. The Void Swarm machines, which had adapted to every Federation weapon, seemed confused by the human approach. They couldn't adjust their defenses fast enough to counter kinetic weapons and boarding parties. "How is this possible?" she asked her science officer. "These humans are using technology we abandoned centuries ago." "That's exactly why it's working," the science officer replied. "The Void Swarm's adaptive systems are designed to counter advanced energy weapons. They have no protocols for dealing with primitive kinetic projectiles." The battle continued for 6 hours. Human ships darted in and out of the Void Swarm formation, firing missiles and railgun slugs at close range. When enemy ships were damaged, Marine boarding parties would storm aboard and destroy them from within. Major Bob Clark led a squadron of human fighters against the swarm's escort craft. His small ships were armed with nuclear-tipped missiles and rapid-fire cannons. Unlike Federation fighters, which relied on shields and energy weapons, the human craft were heavily armored and designed to take punishment. "Remember your training," Bob told his pilots over the radio. "Get in close, hit them hard, and get out fast. Don't give them time to adapt." The human fighters dove into the enemy formation like angry wasps. Their missiles streaked toward Void Swarm interceptors, and nuclear explosions lit up the darkness of space. The enemy machines tried to adapt their defenses, but nuclear weapons were too chaotic and unpredictable. Each explosion was slightly different, making adaptation impossible. On the surface of Corax Prime, Colonel Frank Davis was leading a ground assault against Void Swarm harvesting machines. His troops, including Sergeant Linda Gray and Corporal Mike Johnson, fought from building to building through the planet's main city. "Sir, the machines are trying to adapt to our rifle fire," reported Linda over the radio. "Then switch to explosives," Frank replied. "Grenades, rocket launchers, anything that goes boom. Keep them guessing." The human ground forces used tactics that the Federation had never seen. They fought dirty, using ambush attacks and booby traps. They turned civilian buildings into fortresses and used the city's infrastructure against the enemy. When the machines adapted to one weapon, the humans would switch to another. Mike Johnson set up a heavy machine gun in an abandoned store and opened fire on a group of harvester drones. The large caliber bullets tore through their armor plating, like tissue paper. When they tried to adapt, he switched to an anti-tank rocket that blasted them to pieces. "These things are tough," Mike said to his squad, "but they're not very smart. They keep trying to analyze our weapons instead of just avoiding them." As the battle for Corax Prime continued, word of the human tactics spread throughout the Federation fleet. For the first time in months, they were winning against the Void Swarm. The machines that had seemed unstoppable were being destroyed by weapons and tactics that the civilized galaxy had forgotten. Admiral Zara received reports from across the battlefield. Human ships were pushing the Void Swarm back through sheer aggression and firepower. Their boarding parties were capturing enemy technology intact. Their ground forces were saving civilian populations that the Federation had written off as lost. "Admiral," said her communications officer, "Commander Stone is requesting permission to pursue the retreating Void Swarm forces." Zara hesitated. Federation doctrine called for defensive positions and careful analysis after a victory. But the humans seemed eager to press their advantage while the enemy was confused and disorganized. "Permission granted," she said finally, "but warn them that the Void Swarm main fleet is still intact. This was just a scouting force." Commander Stone's reply came back immediately. "Understood. We're just getting started." As the human fleet regrouped and prepared to advance deeper into Void Swarm territory, the survivors on Corax Prime watched in wonder. The aliens who had been quarantined for their violence had just saved billions of lives using the very tactics that had gotten them isolated in the first place. But the real test was still to come. The Void Swarm had millions of ships and endless resources. The humans had shown they could win battles, but winning the war would require something much more dangerous. They would have to take the fight directly to the enemy's home territory, where the machines were strongest and most prepared. Rick Stone stood on his bridge, looking at the tactical display showing Void Swarm positions throughout the galaxy. There were so many red dots that they almost covered the screen completely. But for the first time since the war began, some of those dots were going dark. "Set course for the next system," he ordered. "Time to show these machines what happens when you threaten humanity's neighbors." 3 weeks after the victory at Corax Prime, the human fleet had spread across 12 star systems, fighting the Void Swarm wherever they could find them. Commander Rick Stone had split his forces into small, fast-moving groups that could strike quickly and disappear before the enemy could respond. Lieutenant Commander Dan Price led one of these groups from his light cruiser Boston. His squadron included 6 destroyers and 24 fighters, all crewed by veterans who had learned to fight the machines in their own brutal way. Dan's tactical approach was simple: hit hard, hit fast, and never fight fair. "Contact ahead," reported his sensor officer. 3 Void Swarm scouts, probably sending data back to their main force. Dan smiled coldly. "Not anymore, they're not. Sue, take your fighters and circle around behind them. Hit their communication arrays first, then their engines. We'll come in from the front with everything we've got." Captain Sue Adams, now leading her own fighter squadron, acknowledged the order. Her 12 fighters broke away from the main group and disappeared into the asteroid field that surrounded the enemy ships. Sue had learned that the Void Swarm machines were predictable in some ways. They always tried to send information back to their central network before fighting. "All fighters, this is lead," Sue broadcast on a tight beam. "Remember, nuclear-tipped missiles only. We want those ships dead before they can adapt to anything." The fighters emerged from the asteroids like sharks attacking wounded prey. Their missiles streaked toward the unsuspecting scout ships, and nuclear fire bloomed in the darkness of space. The first scout ship died instantly, vaporized by 3 direct hits. The second managed to launch a distress signal before Sue's wingman put a missile through its central processor. The third scout tried to run, but Dan's cruiser was waiting. The Boston's main guns spoke with thunder, sending depleted uranium rounds through the enemy ship's engines. The scout tumbled helplessly as the human squadron closed in for the kill. "Boarding party away," Dan ordered. "I want that ship's data core intact." Marines in powered armor jetted across the gap between ships and began cutting through the scout's hull. Within minutes, they had secured the central computer and downloaded its memory banks. The information they found was disturbing but valuable. "Sir," reported the Marine sergeant over the radio, "this ship was mapping Federation refugee camps. The swarm is planning something big." Meanwhile, on the industrial world of Vega Station, Colonel Frank Davis was fighting a different kind of war. The Void Swarm had tried to capture the station's manufacturing facilities intact, sending ground forces instead of simply destroying everything from orbit. It was a mistake that would cost them dearly. Frank's regiment had turned the station into a fortress. Every corridor was trapped, every room was a potential ambush point, and every piece of equipment could be turned into a weapon. His soldiers, including Sergeant Linda Gray and Corporal Mike Johnson, had spent weeks preparing for this fight. "Contact in Section 7, Linda reported from her position in the station's main assembly area. "Looks like a full harvester team, maybe 30 machines." Frank checked his tactical display. Section 7 was a maze of manufacturing equipment and storage tanks, perfect for an ambush. "Mike, take your squad through the maintenance tunnels. Get behind them. Linda, wait for my signal, then hit them from the front." The Void Swarm harvesters moved through the station like they owned it, their mechanical limbs reaching out to claim everything of value. They were designed to strip planets bare, turning raw materials into more machines for the endless swarm. But they had never faced humans who refused to give up their territory. Mike's squad emerged from the maintenance hatches behind the enemy formation. Their weapons were simple but effective: assault rifles, grenade launchers, and anti-tank rockets. The machines tried to adapt to the incoming fire, but the humans kept switching weapons faster than the adaptation protocols could keep up. Now, "Linda!" Frank shouted over the radio. Sergeant Gray and her team opened fire from the front, catching the harvesters in a crossfire. Explosions echoed through the station as human weapons tore into mechanical bodies. When the smoke cleared, 30 enemy machines lay in pieces on the factory floor. "Sir," Mike reported, "these things are learning. They're starting to predict our tactics." Frank nodded grimly. That was the problem with fighting an enemy that could adapt. Every victory taught them something new. Then we need to get creative. Break out the experimental weapons. Time to see if those new plasma charges work. Back in space, Dr. Sam Hughes was working aboard the converted research vessel Newton, analyzing captured void swarm technology. What he had found changed everything about the war. The machines weren't just conquering the galaxy, they were preparing it for something else. "Commander Stone," Sam reported over the long-range communicator, "I've discovered something important about the void swarm's true purpose." Rick's image appeared on the screen, transmitted from his flagship 3 systems away. "What have you found, Doctor?" "They're not just harvesting resources randomly. They're building something massive in the center of their territory. Based on the energy readings and material requirements, I think they're constructing some kind of gateway." "Gateway? To where?" Sam's face was pale with worry. "I think they're from another dimension, Commander. This entire invasion might just be preparation for bringing their main force through from wherever they came from." The implications hit Rick like a physical blow. If the Void Swarm was just the advance force, then the real enemy was still waiting, on the other side of that gateway. "How long do we have?" "Based on the construction rate, maybe 6 weeks. 8 at the most." Rick closed his eyes and thought about the tactical situation. The human fleet had been successful against small void swarm forces, but they were still vastly outnumbered. Fighting the entire enemy fleet around their central stronghold would be suicide, unless they could find another way. "Doctor, can we stop the gateway?" "Theoretically, yes, but it would require getting a massive explosive device to the construction site. We're talking about something with the power to crack a moon." Rick smiled grimly. "Leave that to us, Doctor. Humans have been very good at making things explode for a very long time. The plan that emerged over the next few days was insane, even by human standards." Pete Collins, the young engineer who had first identified the Void Swarm's weakness, had designed a weapon that combined human nuclear technology with captured alien materials. The result was a bomb that could destroy an entire star system. "The technical term is Cascade Fusion Device," Pete explained to the assembled fleet commanders via hologram. "It starts a chain reaction in local space-time that spreads outward, at nearly light speed. Everything within 10 billion kilometers gets turned into energy." Captain Nancy Ford raised her hand. "What about the ship that delivers it?" Pete's expression was somber. "There won't be time to escape. This is a one-way mission." The fleet went quiet. Everyone understood what that meant. Someone would have to fly directly into the heart of Void Swarm territory, past millions of enemy ships, and detonate a weapon that would kill them along with everything else in the system. "I'll do it," Rick said simply. "No, sir," Nancy replied. "The fleet needs you for the overall command. This is a job for someone expendable." "We're all expendable if this fails," Rick shot back. "Besides, I'm not sending anyone on a suicide mission that I wouldn't take myself." Admiral Kate Rivers spoke up from Earth. "Gentlemen, we have 6 weeks to argue about who gets the honor of dying for their species. Right now, we need to focus on getting that weapon to the target." The next month was a blur of preparation and small battles as the human fleet fought its way deeper into Void Swarm territory. Every engagement taught them more about the enemy, but it also cost lives and ships that they couldn't afford to lose. Dan Price's squadron was down to 4 ships after a brutal fight near the Centauri colonies. Sue Adams had lost half her fighter, pilots in a desperate assault on a Void Swarm supply convoy. Frank Davis's regiment was holding Vega Station, but barely. The galaxy was running out of time, and the humans were running out of options. The Void Swarm's central stronghold was protected by more firepower than the entire Federation had possessed at the start of the war. Getting close enough to deploy the Cascade weapon would require a miracle. or it would require humans to do what humans did best: find a way to win when winning should be impossible. The final assault began at dawn, if dawn had any meaning in the darkness between stars. Commander Rick Stone stood on the bridge of the New York, watching as every remaining human ship in the galaxy formed up around his flagship. Behind them came Federation vessels, their crews inspired by human tactics and desperate enough to try anything. "Final count, sir," Lieutenant Mary Bell reported. 43 human ships, 18 Federation vessels, against approximately 2 million Void Swarm defenders. Rick nodded grimly. The odds were impossible, but humanity had never been good at accepting impossible odds. "Signal the fleet. Operation Last Stand is a go. All ships advance on the central nexus." 6 light-years away, the Void Swarm's massive construction project hung in space like a mechanical nightmare. The gateway was nearly complete, a ring of dark metal large enough to swallow Earth's moon. Around it, millions of enemy ships moved, in perfect formation, protecting their ultimate weapon. Admiral Kate Rivers, commanding the operation from Earth, watched the tactical display with growing dread. The human fleet looked like a handful of insects attacking a giant's fortress, but those insects carried the hopes of every living thing in the galaxy. "All ships, this is Admiral Rivers," she broadcast across the fleet. "You know what's at stake. If that gateway opens, everything we've fought for dies. Show these machines what humanity means." The Void Swarm detected the approaching fleet and responded immediately. Massive weapon platforms turned toward the attackers, charging energy cannons that could vaporize a battleship in seconds. Millions of fighter craft launched from hidden bays, forming a living wall of destruction between the humans and their target. "Here they come," Rick said calmly. "All ships engage at will. Remember, we're not trying to win this fight. We just need to get close enough for the package delivery." The first wave of Void Swarm fighters hit the human formation like a tsunami of metal and plasma. Federation ships died instantly, their elegant shields overwhelmed by sheer firepower. But the human vessels kept pushing forward, their crude armor absorbing punishment that would have destroyed more sophisticated ships. Captain Nancy Ford drove her destroyer Atlanta through the enemy formation, her guns blazing continuously. Nuclear missiles streaked from her launch tubes, each one taking dozens of enemy fighters with it when it detonated. Her ship was already badly damaged, hull plates peeling away under enemy fire, but she kept going. "Nancy, pull back," Rick ordered over the radio. "Your ship can't take much more." "Negative, Commander," Nancy replied as another explosion rocked her bridge. "We're almost through their outer screen. Just need to open the path a little wider." The Atlanta's engines roared as Nancy pushed them past their safety limits. Her ship plowed through the enemy formation like a battering ram, clearing a corridor for the ships behind her. But the effort cost everything. Enemy fire finally found her reactor, and the Atlanta disappeared in a ball of nuclear fire. "Nancy's down?" Mary reported quietly. Rick forced himself to watch the tactical display instead of mourning his friend. The sacrifice had worked. The human fleet was breaking through the Void Swarm's defenses, pushing deeper toward the central nexus with every passing minute. Lieutenant Commander Dan Price led the surviving fighters in a desperate charge against the gateway's weapon platforms. His small ships darted between massive gun turrets, dropping nuclear charges on anything that looked important. The weapons couldn't adapt fast enough to the chaotic human attack patterns. "Dan, we need those platforms. Down now," Rick transmitted. "The main force can't get through while they're active." "Copy that, Commander. Going in for the close approach." Dan's fighter squadron dove toward the nearest weapon platform, their engines screaming at maximum power. Enemy fire filled the space around them, but the human pilots kept coming. One by one, the fighters disappeared in brilliant explosions, but their missiles found their targets. When the smoke cleared, the massive weapon platform was dark and lifeless. Dan's voice came over the radio, weak but determined. "Platform down. Commander, but I'm the only one left. Get back to the fleet, Dan. You've done enough." "Negative, sir. I'm already too damaged to make it back. I'll stay here and keep them busy." Rick watched helplessly as Dan's lone fighter continued its attack. drawing enemy fire away from the main fleet. It was the kind of senseless courage that made humanity both dangerous and admirable. The human fleet was down to 20 ships when they finally reached the gateway's defensive perimeter. The massive ring structure loomed ahead of them, its surface crawling with construction machines still working to complete the project. At its center, space itself seemed to ripple and bend as the gateway prepared to open. "Pete," Rick called, to the engineer in the ship's cargo bay. "How's our special delivery?" Pete Collins looked up from the Cascade fusion device, a weapon that barely fit in the New York's largest hold. "Ready to go, Commander. But remember, once we activate it, we have exactly 60 seconds before the chain reaction starts. That's cutting it close. It's the best I can do. The reaction needs time to build up energy, but too much time and the Void Swarm might find a way to stop it." Rick made his decision. "All remaining ships, this is your commander. Form up on the New York and prepare for final approach. We're going to ram our way through their defenses and deliver this package personally." The surviving human and Federation ships arranged themselves around Rick's flagship like a steel arrow aimed at the heart of the enemy stronghold. They charged forward together, their guns blazing in one last desperate assault. The Void Swarm threw everything they had at the attackers. Energy beams lanced out from hidden weapons, and swarms of interceptors tried to block their path. Ships died on both sides, friend and foe alike, but the human formation kept pushing forward. Captain Jake Morrison, who had started this whole war by carrying a message between species, found himself on the bridge of a Federation cruiser fighting alongside the people he had brought into the conflict. The irony wasn't lost on him as he watched human and alien crews working together to save the galaxy. "Jake," Rick's voice came over the radio, "in case we don't make it, I want you to know that bringing us into this fight was the right choice. Save the speeches for after we win, Commander." The New York finally broke through the last line of defense and approached the gateway itself. The massive structure filled their view screen, its dark metal surface covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. This was a doorway to another dimension, a portal that would bring horrors beyond imagination into their universe. "Pete, activate the device," Rick ordered. In the cargo bay, Pete's hands flew over the weapons control panel. The Cascade fusion device began to hum with barely contained energy, its core heating up to temperatures that could melt planets. Numbers counted down on the display. 59 seconds, 58, 57. "All ships, this is Rick Stone. The commander broadcast on all frequencies. It's been an honor serving with you. Tell them back home that we did our job." The New York's engines died as Rick shut down all non-essential systems. The ship drifted toward the gateway on momentum alone, carrying its cargo of destruction into the heart of the enemy stronghold. Around them, the surviving human and Federation vessels continued fighting, holding off the Void Swarm forces for as long as possible. 30 seconds, Pete reported. Through the view screen, they could see the gateway beginning to activate. The space at its center rippled like water, and something vast and dark moved on the other side. The real invasion was about to begin. 20 seconds. Rick looked around his bridge at the crew who had followed him across the galaxy, to die in a place none of them had ever heard of. They were afraid, but they were ready. That was what made them human. 10 seconds. The Void Swarm finally realized what was happening. Enemy ships converged on the New York from all directions, trying desperately to stop the inevitable. But they were too late. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The Cascade fusion device detonated, and for a brief moment, the human ship became brighter than a star. The explosion raced outward in all directions, turning everything it touched into pure energy. The gateway, the Void Swarm fleet, the Nexus, everything within billions of kilometers simply ceased to exist. The chain reaction spread across space faster than light itself, and when it finally stopped, there was nothing left but empty darkness, where the enemy stronghold used to be. Back on Earth, Admiral Rivers watched the tactical display as the red dots representing Void Swarm forces began disappearing across the galaxy. Without their central command, the machines were shutting down one by one. Their invasion finally ended. "It's over," she said quietly. "They did it. The galaxy was saved, but the cost had been enormous. Humanity had lost most of its fleet and many of its best people. The Federation was in ruins, whole species extinct or nearly so. It would take generations to rebuild what had been destroyed, but they were alive, and that was enough. In the years that followed, the galaxy slowly healed. Humans took their place as full members of the galactic community, no longer quarantined or feared. Their courage in the final battle had earned them respect and gratitude that would last forever. Jake Morrison, one of the few humans to survive the war, stood on the bridge of a new joint Human Federation starship, watching as human